this afternoon I have the privilege of introducing Sarah McDougall to you all. And I'm going to read some of my notes because she has such a tremendous bio that I don't want to leave anything important out. She's an international speaker and trainer on abuse response. She has authored multiple books, including the one that is on display called Safe Churches Out at the Table. She is a blogger, a coach, and a social media influencer. She is the founder of Wild Women in Leadership Development and the co-founder of the Bucket Brigade Against Abuse. She's also a personal friend of mine, and when I called her earlier this year and I said, Sarah, we really need you to come in and we need you to do some training for us in Collegedale, she's like, I'm booked up through fall of 2020. I was like, oh, man, okay. We talked a couple days later and she said, you know what, I can squeeze you in. This is the only weekend that I'm available. I said, we'll take it. That's great, we'll take it. So thank you so much, Sarah, for being here, and thank you for squeezing us in. And please give Sarah McDugal a warm welcome.
I almost reached for your mic, like I need to carry that around too. So I just want to ask the sound booth, have we been pushed to live stream yet? Yes? No? We don't know? We're giving a thumbs up. Okay, so another housekeeping thing. Is the live stream already on? Is it on the Facebook page? Okay, well, I don't know where your church website is, Joel. They're going to get on the Facebook page, and Joel is going to shoot me a message of some kind when that is on the Facebook page, and then I'm going to ask those of you who have Facebook on your phones if you would be willing to go to the church's Facebook page and share it, because if that's, assuming that you're comfortable doing so, obviously no pressure if that is something you don't feel safe to do, but if you feel safe to do that, that is one way that we can help many other individuals become aware of what is being taught today, because it's being provided live on the Facebook page and the website. So I want to thank the pastoral staff, the domestic violence ministry team, and the women's ministry team here at Collegedale Community for putting in the effort, the education, the awareness, and the hard work that it takes to really work to make this church a flagship in abuse ministry in this area. It is not often that you find a church that is as willing as this church is to talk about really tough subjects and to talk about them openly. That doesn't mean that this church or any other church is a perfect church, because all of our churches are filled with humans, and this side of heaven, we're all still going to have churches filled with humans, which means there are always going to be cases and situations and challenges and things that we need to work together on. Now, I want to do a couple of quick housekeeping things. This right here, does everyone have one of these? Yep. If you do not have one of these, I want to make sure that you get one. If you don't have one of these, raise your hands. And we do have a few who don't have one, half a dozen or so, maybe a little more. And this is yours to take home with you. I want to make sure every person gets a copy of this. So, because I will be referring to it through some of the presentations. And there's a lot of detail in here. This is a collection of resources and infographics that we made available from my team during Domestic Violence Awareness Month last month. We put them all into a booklet specifically for this training event. So the Systems of Abuse booklet, that's yours to keep. Also, out front, there are 3 amazing posters, and I'm going to completely mortify my designer right now and ask Emily to raise her hand, or Shelly can point her out over here, because the incredible genius designer who I love working with, who's designed 2 out of my 3 book covers and all of this material, including the Systems of Abuse handbook, is right here with us today, and she's a huge advocate for healing after abuse. So I'm really glad Emily could be here. This one, does your partner? Did each of you get? You may each take 1 poster. If you are here representing another church, you can talk to me afterwards about taking home extras to share in your church. The Collegedale Community Church has been provided with the digital files so that they can print them of their own, so that's not necessary if you're here in this church. Does Your Partner is a poster that is intended to go on the back side of bathroom stalls in women's restrooms in your church. It asks a number of questions that might not be commonly thought of as abusive tactics or abusive experiences, so that someone who is experiencing those and doesn't realize this is abuse can have that information in a private moment where they can write down contact information. So at the bottom, that's where your church can put in a local domestic violence shelter, the national hotline, or other professional full-time resource for them to know where to call. And hey, in case you wanted to do something in the ladies' restroom besides stare at your phone, now there's something interesting you can read to either help yourself or a friend. Next one, 13 minimum steps to church security. You know what? Every church in today's climate should have security protocols and security plans where your leaders, deacons, elders know what to do in case of an emergency and how to handle it. These have been provided by the Loster Consulting Group, and Gary Loster is a friend of mine who is a security consulting expert who specializes in training churches how to respond to active shooter situations. And he gave us, he's a former law enforcement and military service member, and he gave us these steps. Last but not least is a resource list. And you know what? Why should we make a resource list that's just small and ugly and you're going to want to just throw away after it's been hanging out in the bottom of your purse for a while? So we made a nice big resource list poster. This one has resources for children. Tales of the Exodus children's books will be available for sale tomorrow. And local Family Justice Center and strategic legal coaching with Shelley Perez, who was the one in the white dress who just introduced me. And nationwide resources including counseling networks, free telephone support groups, best books to read, and other coaching services. So I want to make sure that everyone has these where you can take them home and share them with others, and everyone gets at least one copy. So that being said, the next thing is everyone who is willing to share your name and email confidentially with me, I will send you my best books to read, curated, suggested reading list. So I'm going to take this iPad, pass it around, and after each person, the little tiny circle right there, pay attention to this. We had all kinds of issues with it last night when we were testing it out. You don't do the back button, you just do the refresh button. That one right there. Not that one, this one. Not that one, this one. So, there we go. Let's talk about trauma. What is post-traumatic stress disorder? Anybody know? I want you guys to talk back and forth with me a little bit because my voice is going to be very tired by the end of today, and then we've got 6 sessions tomorrow. So, PTSD is a series of symptoms that can arise after a traumatic episode. That can be something like a car collision, an earthquake, or a sexual assault. But have you heard of complex PTSD? Yes? Some of you are shaking, nodding. Yes, I know some of you do because I've talked to you before. PTSD is that traumatic response after a single isolated incident. Complex PTSD is the traumatic experience from experiencing things, the traumatic response, from experiencing things that you could not make to stop happening, stuff that's happening over and over and over again, and you don't feel like there's any safe way to get out, such as experiencing childhood neglect, experiencing other types of abuse early in life, experiencing ongoing protracted domestic abuse, experiencing human trafficking, being a prisoner of war, or living in a war zone. Sometimes homes with domestic violence feel like a war zone, and you don't know where or how or when you can ever make it stop. And so when individuals experience this, it becomes more than just that one thing that happened that you have PTSD from because you couldn't ever get away and you never knew when it was going to start again. Something else that I run into a lot is the contrast between PTSD and complex PTSD would be like comparing one sexual assault, which is horrific, with ongoing sexual molestation by a family member, and you never know when they're going to come over, and you never know when you're going to see them, and you have to constantly be bracing yourself for those potential renewed interactions. Now, so PTSD, just to summarize, is, and I have to change my slide thing here, is generally related to a single traumatic event, and CPTSD is related to prolonged repeated trauma where the individual has little to no chance of escape. We just went over that. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about very quickly now as we're just kind of moving forward with this particular session is ACEs. Who has not heard of ACEs? Several. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Here we go. So, little side note, I am having to keep up with two things, so I have my presenter notes here, but they're running those from up there all the way from the back. So I have to click one and remember to click the other, which means I've got to multitask and speak in intelligent sentences all at the same time. So please just hang out with me and just bear with me. I'm really trying to keep all these balls in the air. So adverse childhood experiences, these are, okay, from the time of conception to the time of our death, adverse childhood experiences can disrupt neurodevelopment, can impair social, emotional, and cognitive function, can encourage the person who has those experiences to adopt risky health behaviors. It can increase disease, disability, and social problems, and it can lead to early death. When, as children, we are exposed to continual, ongoing types of abuse or large traumatic experiences, we often have, the higher your ACE score, basically, the higher your risk of early death, disease, chronic issues, and so on. So here is another quiz, but we're just going to fly through this one. You're not going to have to write anything down. If you have a notebook or something, you can tally it on your phone and just kind of keep track. This is for your information only. This is the expanded ACEs questionnaire. Normally it's only 10 questions, but this has been expanded by Dr. David Sedlacek, who is a professor at Andrews University, and he's been doing a tremendous amount of research on the ACEs questionnaire. So, question number 1. While you were growing up, during your first 18 years of life, did a parent or another adult in the house often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you feel afraid that you might be physically hurt? Did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard you had marks or were injured? Give yourself 1 point for anything that applies to you. Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or try to have or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Did you often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or valued, or that your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Did you often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect you, or that your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? Was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? Sometimes or often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few minutes, or threatened with a gun or a knife? Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, or who used street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Did a household member ever go to prison? Did anyone in your family exercise dominance or control over other family members to the point where others felt that they had no voice? Were spiritual writings such as the Bible used by parents or other significant leaders to make you see things their way or control your behavior? Or was a parent or primary caregiver committed to ministry to others to the point that your needs were neglected? Were you bullied over time? This is that complex aspect. At school, physically, verbally, or through cyber technology without effective interaction or intervention, from parents or teachers. As a child, did you experience the death of a parent or a sibling, or did either of your parents abandon the family? Were you exposed over time to war or famine, or have you been diagnosed with PTSD? Were you raised in a neighborhood where there was frequent gang activity or violence or other activity that resulted in you feeling unsafe? Did your family live in abject poverty, or were you homeless? Did you feel pressured to perform in school or in other ways in order to earn your parents' love or approval, or to prove your own value or worth? Were you a student at a school where there was a school shooting or hostage situation or a similar terrorist action or threat? Did your parent or another close relative or friend commit suicide? Did you experience traumatic or regular mistreatment or abuse due to your race or religion, or due to your gender, sexual orientation, or culture? Were you raised in a country where there was government control of religion or other aspects of life, or where dissent was met with force or imprisonment? And what is your expanded ACE score? Now, I'm not asking you to tell me that. Just mark it down for yourself. A high ACE score does not mean that you are destined for a negative or unsuccessful life. It does mean that you are at greater risk for chronic health problems, for depression or discouragement, for other things that come with healing from early trauma. Now, the good thing is, when we realize that, if we choose to take action to seek healing. I'm talking this whole weekend about very, very hard-hitting stuff. We got a little bit of a slow start. The rest of the time, we're going to be drinking from a fire hose, just kind of like lock on and try to not get blown away by all the information. I realize that it's a lot of information, and I live and breathe it, and it's in my head, and so sometimes things make sense to me, and maybe these are just connecting, and the light bulbs are going off for some of you, and that is okay. It's okay to write it down, to need to go back and look at it again, to watch it over again, to find more resources if this is early exposure to you for some of these pieces of information. I don't expect you to just fly along at the same speed, perhaps, and that's all right. But what I want is for every person who is here and who is watching to know that the whole purpose of having these tough conversations is not just to lament how bad it is, but it is to take assessment of the damage so that we can step forward toward healing. Because that is really the reason we're here. So, signs of trauma survival. Whoop, there we go. If that one catches behind, kind of lags behind, will one of you guys just like wave at me? This is from Cascade Behavioral Health, and these are cognitive signs of trauma. Intrusive thoughts of the event that may occur out of the blue. Nightmares, visual images of the event, loss of memory and concentration abilities, disorientation, confusion, mood swings, avoidance of activities or places that trigger memories of what happened to you, social isolation and withdrawal, lack of interest in previously enjoyable activities. Oftentimes, when I first meet women who are at the beginning of trying to get out of a difficult situation, they wonder what's wrong with them. We have these vague memories of the vibrant, sparkling person we used to be. And now we're struggling to remember the things that we went to the grocery store for. And that's called trauma fog. And it's a real thing. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've been through trauma. And it can heal. Physical signs that you've been through trauma: being easily startled, tremendous fatigue and exhaustion, tachycardia, that means your heart racing, edginess, insomnia, chronic muscle patterns, sexual dysfunction, changes in eating and sleeping patterns, vague complaints of aches and pains throughout the body and you just can't quite figure out why. Extreme alertness, always on the lookout for warnings of potential danger. That's also called hypervigilance. Psychological signs: overwhelming fear, obsessive and compulsive behaviors, detaching from other people and emotions, emotional numbing, depression or guilt, especially if you lived and others didn't, shame, emotional shock, disbelief, irritability and anger, anxiety, and even panic attacks. Here's the thing: these are normal. These are normal. These are normal responses to abnormal situations. Until recently, the ability to recognize psychological and emotional trauma was far more limited than it is now. It has undergone a revolution throughout the years. Until recently, psychologists only made note of men who'd been through catastrophic wars as having psychological trauma. The women's movement in the 1960s broadened our view of traumatic events to include violence and sexual abuse against children. After much was learned about trauma in the 1990s, we're talking as recently as the 1990s, you guys, the definition of traumatic events has further expanded thanks to the abilities of MRIs and CAT scans of the brain. We are now able to observe the brain in action. And these brain scans have actually revealed that trauma changes the structure and the function of the brain. That's why, when I say this, it's normal. Because what you have been through, what someone has experienced, has actually affected your brain. The good news is the brain is a very, very healing-oriented organ. The brain can rewire, the brain can reroute itself, the brain can heal. But we have to be careful about heaping shame and guilt and embarrassment on ourselves or others when we are functioning below where we expect ourselves to be. Stress-related disorders are significantly associated with the risk of subsequent autoimmune disease. Now, a Swedish study of 106,464 patients, that's a bit of a sample size, they were studying over 106,000 patients with stress-related disorders. Their objective was to determine whether there is an association between stress-related disorders and subsequent autoimmune diseases. And they recognized that there was a significant association between stress and PTSD and autoimmune issues. From the book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse by Dr. Barbara Steffens, which I highly recommend for anyone who has gone through a marriage that included pornography, pornography addiction, sexual addiction, infidelity, one-night stands, anything along those lines. This is my top recommended book, Your Sexually Addicted Spouse by Dr. Barbara Steffens. When a woman is experiencing betrayal trauma, the discovery that her spouse is addicted to pornography or has been unfaithful in other ways, or living under abuse even if she is not aware that it is abuse, she is at her highest risk level of developing an autoimmune disorder or other chronic health issue. Signs of dysfunctional wellness. This is from Brenda Wise, who is a chaplain and post-traumatic functional wellness coach that I work with. brain fog, difficulty concentrating, sleep changes and insomnia, chronic fatigue, weight changes, anxiety, aches and pains or fibromyalgia, nausea, digestive disorders, immune impairment, and autoimmune disorders are the primary complaints among survivors of trauma. Brenda Wise also says, men and women were created as whole beings. We cannot subdivide our physiological, psychological, and spiritual wellness into separate, unrelated functions. It can't be done and find healing. When Jesus healed the woman who had bled for 12 years, what did he say? Daughter, be of good comfort. Your faith has made you whole. Some translations of the word whole say cured or well instead of whole. But the meaning of the word whole here is that it has saved you. You are whole. So the question, it's kind of a Captain Obvious question. Can trauma survivors heal? Well, moving forward after trauma, post-traumatic growth teaches us that people can improve in 5 areas: the appreciation of life, our relationships with others, new possibilities in life, personal strength, and spiritual change. This list is compiled by Jennifer Schwerzer, who is an author and counselor and another colleague of mine. She also says that predictors of post-traumatic growth, as opposed to regression, are social support before and after trauma, opportunities for emotional disclosure, spirituality, and acceptance coping. Julianne from Spiritual Sounding Board, she and I don't know if you're familiar with her, anybody follows her on Twitter. She tweets under Defend the Sheep. Anyway, we were at an advocacy retreat a couple of weekends ago, and one of the things that she kept saying over and over and over again is that the single most important healing factor that she has seen make a difference in other people's healing and her own is being able to tell their story in a safe place, and to tell it over and over and over again, because part of psychological abuse is that you doubt your own perception of reality, right? And you wonder if what you experienced was actually real. So, as we tell our story and we seek to tell it accurately and tell it well in safe places to safe people, we are doing part of those steps for rewiring the brain, because we are telling ourselves that what happened to us can be believed. Telling our story, repeated, honest disclosures to safe audiences, is a huge, huge factor in healing. Other actual therapies include EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, cognitive behavioral therapy with a trauma-informed counselor, and coaching with trauma-informed and abuse recovery coaches. Just wrapping this up, I want to end this particular presentation, and oh my goodness, we got done in under an hour even with all of that. I am really proud. That is super awesome. Okay, sorry, I was worried that that was going to go way over. So back to my train of thought. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 4. And I think this is the underlying message for us all weekend, and that is the message that God wants to comfort us. God comforts us in all of our tribulation. Why? So that we can comfort others, those who are in any trouble, with the same kind of comfort that He has given us when He comforts us. We're going to talk a lot more over this weekend about the role of empathy in the gospel, in abuse, the lack of empathy among abusers, and the importance of empathy in healing from abuse. And all of that circles back around to being comforted by God so that we can give comfort to others, giving what we receive.